In this week's Parsha, we see that Reuven and Gad, the tribes of Reuven and Gad, ask Moshe, they say, we're a group of people with a lot of cattle, and this land here on the eastern side of the Jordan River is great for cattle. Would you mind if we kind of set up shop here, if we settle here? And they actually say, we would like to build, a place for our cattle to dwell and cities for our children. Moshe does not take too kindly to this. He thinks that they're being selfish. He thinks they're trying to get out of, going to war with their brethren into the land of Israel. But ultimately, after they explain their commitment to go help the fight and to go help in the war, Moshe does come around and he does agree to this. And he tells them something different, though. He says that instead, he said, "Benu lachem arim letabchem," build cities for your children, v'gidros letzonechem, and places for your flocks to dwell. Very interestingly, Moshe flips the order. Originally, these tribes say, we want to build a place for our cattle to live and to build cities for our children. Moshe flips the order. Why is that? The Medrash says this is because Moshe is rebuking them and he's telling them that, unfortunately, they had their priorities mixed up. And he says that they made the mistake that they made the ikar tafel, the tafel ikar. They made the most primary thing secondary, and the secondary thing the most important. I'm sorry, Siri thought I was talking to her. Now, the interesting thing here is that they got the order backwards. And Moshe explained to them, the number one priority, what you should have said first is you're going to build cities for your precious children, and only then will you worry about your cattle, your monetary possessions. And they made this mistake that too many of us make, that we get our priorities mixed up, and we sometimes think that the pursuit of material well-being and wealth is of primary importance, even more so than the importance of more significant things like our children, our families, our relationships, our friends. And this is a problem that a lot of us make, and it goes further than that. As we sit here now in the beginning of the 9 days, we're approaching Tisha B'Av, where we mourn the loss of our temple and the fact we sit here in exile. So the Medrash tells us in a different place, it says that because of their love for their possessions and how they desperately wanted to desire outside of the land of Israel in this comfortable place, lefichach galu tchila mikol hashvatim, they were the first ones later to get exiled because of this. So there's this connection of this pursuit and love of the material, the comfort of outside of Israel, that ultimately leads to their initial exile in later years. Similarly, the Talmud Yerushalmi tells us, it's well known that the Jewish people were exiled to the Second Temple. The Second Temple was destroyed because of baseless hatred. But the Yerushalmi adds something significant. It says the reason the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, it says Shahai Ovin es HaMamon. They loved money. The Sonin Elu Elu, and they hated each other. Sinas Chinam, they had a baseless hatred they had for each other. So very interesting that this love of money we see from Reuven and Gad has this connection to this time of year we're in with the destruction of the temple. And I think for us this is very practical, that we have to understand and think for ourselves, what are our priorities? There's a concern that we get too sucked up in our professions, in our professional lives, and sometimes we forget to focus on the things that really, truly matter, like our children, our families, our relationships, even self-care, taking care of ourselves. And I think it's upon us, especially now we live in this digital world where you don't just leave work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon with your computer at the office. You bring your phone with you home, which dwells in your pocket the entire evening. People are emailing you all day expecting a response, texting you expecting a response. But we have to understand that when I'm home after 5 p.m. and I'm playing with my children, that's primary. That's of utmost importance. I'm at dinner with my friends. That takes precedence than whatever is buzzing in my pocket trying to get my attention back for the sake of the work that I do, for the pursuit of the material that I'm involved in. We have to keep things focused, and God willing, by having our priorities set straight and doing the opposite of this pursuit, this desperate pursuit of the mammon that we see from Reuven and Gad, that the Talmud tells us led ultimately to the destruction of the temple. Hopefully, we'll celebrate in the near future the rebuilding of our temple, We will know no more mourning or suffering or sorrow, but only joy, bliss, and delight with the rebuilding of the temple.